This is Reworking Work, a video series from Quartz where we go deep with senior executives on the inner workings of their companies. Today's guest, founder and CEO of Thrive Global, Arianna Huffington.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reworking Work. Today we have Arianna Huffington with us, and I'm just so excited to be welcoming you. You have such a great spirit, and I can't wait for you to share your wisdom.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be with you. I love how we matched what we are wearing. So for those of you who don't know much about my recent history, I left the Huffington Post in 2016 to found Thrive Global to help us end the stress and burnout epidemic. I had helped raise awareness around these issues through the Huffington Post, but I wanted to go beyond raising awareness to helping people change behaviors. And for that, I needed to build a behavior change technology company, which is what Thrive does, working exclusively with the workplaces. In preparation for that, I wrote 2 books on the subject, Thrive and The Sleep Revolution. And I'm thrilled to be talking with you.
Oh, thanks, Arianna. You know, you mentioned your book, and I know your passion for sleep and the positive impacts that it can have. Let's call sleep maybe like a long game for a day, but I'm curious how you came upon this power of micro breaks or resets, as you call them.
Yes, so the power of microsteps, as we call them, is key to behavior change. The chair of our scientific board, BJ Fogg from Stanford, has done a lot of scientific research on how to change behavior. And one thing is clear, New Year resolutions don't change behavior. They are big. We tend to abandon them after 2 weeks. So at Thrive, we break down all our daily habits into microsteps. And we have 6 journeys. The first is around sleep, the second around food, the third around movement, the fourth around focus, which has a lot to do with our growing addiction to our phones and social media, the fifth around connection with each other and ourselves, and finally, money. We work with a lot of frontline workers at Walmart, Levi's, CVS, and we find that financial stress can be a huge source of stress that affects every aspect of our health.
Yeah, so I love that. Thank you, Arianna. You know, I know you have a call center case study that you've been working on. I actually worked in a call center through college, so I can see the benefits personally, but I'm curious, what did you find?
Well, it's been absolutely amazing to see the impact, both on the well-being of customer agents, call center agents, different companies give them different names, but also on their productivity. And one of the things I love the most is how they feel that they matter more to their employer, because a lot of call center agents feel very disposable. There's very high attrition rate. So our resets, by saying, for example, thank you so much for the work you are doing for Providence Health or Goldman Sachs or whatever, one of the dozens of companies we're working with, now take 60 seconds for yourself. That fact alone makes them feel I matter. And also the fact that it's only 60 seconds is based on the neuroscience that while stress is unavoidable, cumulative stress is avoidable. Mm-hmm. And it takes 60 to 90 seconds to move us from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system and reduce the cortisol stress hormone. And as a result, we don't end up the day marinated in stress, which is when people often binge eat or binge drink or have trouble sleeping. And basically, there are hundreds of preloaded resets at Thrive, and they all have an emphasis on our breathing, guiding us to take deep breaths in and deep breaths out, but also an emphasis on gratitude remembering what we're grateful for, because we know that gratitude cannot coexist with fear and anxiety. And stretching, just getting up and stretching for 60 seconds changes how we feel. And my favorite thing that we've made part of onboarding at Thrive is to build our own personalized reset. And that includes pictures of the people we love in our lives, children, parents, friends, pets, favorite quotes. One of mine is a Rumi quote, "I love, live life as though everything is rigged in your favor." A piece of music. Mine is Ave Maria, played by Yo-Yo Ma. But also, I have another reset that has Taylor Swift singing "You Need to Calm Down." So you can have very different moods, play them at different times, share them with colleagues, friends, etc. So they're part of our call center work, but they're also part of our work with employees who have the privilege to be able to work from home during a pandemic.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned cortisol, Arianna. It was probably 15 or so years ago, and not as dramatic as your wake-up call of smashing your cheek or breaking your cheekbone. But I was at a doctor and they said, your cortisol levels are through the roof. And I said, first of all, what's cortisol? And I learned, right, that's the stress hormone that you're producing. And I said, no, I'm not stressed. I'm not burnt out at all. And it took multiple tests. I was convinced that I wasn't stressed or burnt out until I saw the data looking at me in the face, and I knew that I needed to do something different.
That is amazing, because I had the same experience. The day I collapsed from burnout and sleep deprivation in 2007 and hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone. If you had asked me that morning, "Arianna, how are you?" I would have said, "Fine." Because we all learn how to keep running on empty.
Yeah.
And even how to be productive running on empty, in a transactional way. Yeah. So when we begin to be much more aware of our own state of being, everything changes. And that's why I love biometric measurements. I'm wearing my Oura ring, and I look at my sleep every morning, except if I know I didn't get a good night's sleep, a delayed flight, a very early start, whatever. I don't look at it until the day after.
Because you already know.
I already know. And I find if I look at it, it's going to reinforce my feeling tired. So I don't want that reinforcement. So I wait.
Yeah, that is really smart. I haven't been doing that. I was so disappointed the other day. I woke up and my readiness score was in the high 70s, and it's usually like high 80s, 90s something. And I was like you, probably too disappointed. So I'm gonna use your trick and wait till the next day.
Yes. No, we should not let these devices kind of take over. They are tools, and we should use them in a way that supports us.
Right. I found that it kind of makes me gamify my day. So if I know what my data is, I know how to react to it.
Yes.
And, I think that's much to do with the operations of my life. But when we look at the workplace, Arianna, I love that you focus on both humanity and the business with what you're measuring. I call that operationalizing our culture, right? We need to define what we want out of our culture, how we want our people to feel. And then we go about putting processes, tools, and mindsets into place that will get us there. So I'm hoping for you, as you think about your own, do you call them thrivers, your employees? What are they called?
Yes.
Thrivers?
Thrivers.
Yes. Okay. So when you think about your own thrivers, could you share one or two success stories from those thrivers eating their own dog food with this product?
Absolutely. So first of all, we operationalize it right at the beginning of onboarding. So we start onboarding with what we call the entry interview. Mm-hmm. So that happens between the new thriver and their manager on day one. And the first question is, what's important to you outside of work, and how can we support you? And that is key, because once your manager knows something that really matters to you, like you could say, it's important for me to take my daughter to school at such and such time in the morning, or I have a physical therapy appointment at such and such time, whatever, then they can include that in your regular one-on-ones. And, there may be a time when you are asked to participate on a conference call at a time when you want to take your daughter to school. But as long as it doesn't happen every day, it's not a problem. People don't mind what they have to do occasionally. Then they mind what they have to do every day. And I think especially as now we're still in a hybrid world, even though more and more people are going back to the office, it brings more connection between the manager and the employee. Our number one cultural value is compassionate directness, encouraging people to speak up, not to bottle frustrations and disagreements or anything that's going on, because when they fester, you can't really solve them. And as a result, we find, for example, during our weekly team meetings, we have somebody give a product feedback, because we use our own products, to your point of eating our own dog food or drinking our own champagne, whatever you prefer. And, in front of the entire company, somebody will say something that's not working for them in the product. And it's great, the product manager on this feature will respond. They will give a timeline for fixing it. And it's a great way for people to feel that that's not criticism in the conventional sense of the word. That's giving your colleagues an opportunity to make something better. And it's not blaming, it's just clarity about how to keep making products that are better and better for our customers.
I like that. And not that we are afraid of failure, but I almost think it's the earlier version of a failure forum, right, Arianna? Like, let's do this before we get to failure, if we can.
Absolutely. And let's find things that we can make better before customers find things we can make better.
My favorite question. I think if giving feedback one-on-one, or even giving feedback about a product, if we could normalize asking the question of what could we be doing better or differently, I think we get better outcomes. It's about doing something better or differently, not that we did it wrong.
Exactly, because if you accept, Anna, that we are all works in progress, there's nobody who is doing everything perfectly. And also, every business is a work in progress. If we accept that also, I think we change what we mean by diversity and inclusion, because right now there is a lot of judgment that goes into it. And a lot of people, as a result, feel that they have to walk on eggshells, because if they make a mistake, if they use the wrong word, they're going to be canceled. I want to change that culture and give ourselves a break, give ourselves grace. And if somebody makes a mistake, acknowledges it, and you accept his apology, can we move on? That's, I think, a very important moment right now in business culture, when we have to bring more redemption, more forgiveness, and more grace into our interactions.
And that's that balance of the humanity and the operations, which I appreciate so much. Quartz at Work speaks to three unique audiences, Arianna. We look at the employees, so the individuals, we look at the leaders, and the decision makers that are building and maintaining the system in which we work. So I think right now we're good on the employee. We've given them some feedback and some tips on what they should be doing. Let's talk about leaders for a minute. How do we do this for our leaders?
Well, the first thing in our leadership journeys, we like, when we launch in a company, to start with what we call a cultural activation, a fireside chat. 3 leadership journeys, ideally, with the top leaders. That's how we launched recently at CVS, for example. We launched with a fireside chat with Karen Lynch, the CEO, with Laura Havenack, the CHRO, and me, and brought the Thrive platform to the 2,800 leaders. Because once the leaders start using it and they get value and they tell us the stories about what microsteps they're using, how it makes them more productive, as well as better in their health and their mental health, then they're going to bring that cultural permission to everyone else. So when we launched to all their colleagues, as they call their employees, 300,000 of them, 3 weeks later, we had prepared the ground. And the other thing that we are finding is key for leaders is to recognize that we need to put our own oxygen masks on first. Very often leaders, especially in frenetic, difficult times like we're going through now, they feel that their lives have to match the frenetic pace of what is going on, and it's the opposite. I find that leaders that can be in the eye of the hurricane, that can be unflappable, that can take care of themselves no matter what's coming their way, are going to make better decisions. And after all, judgment and decision-making is the essence of leadership.
And I think leadership and parenting are so much alike. I don't know about you, Arianna, but like we don't get a rule book, and we learn from mistakes. We learn from trying it one way that didn't feel great and then trying it a different way next time.
Absolutely. But also, if we don't take care of ourselves, we are going to be more reactive. We are going to be less resilient. We're going to be more judgmental, and we are going to be more easily depleted.
Right. How do we then, we've now grounded. I love when you said that we prepared the ground for the leaders, gave me chills. So we prepared the ground for the leaders. How do we scale this then for the system, for the entire company itself, whether that's 50 people or 50,000?
I think the key, and again, we are finding that based on a lot of data we have collected, is to bring the well-being interventions into the workflow. It's kind of amazing the difference it makes if it is a push offering as opposed to a pull offering. Again, at Pfizer, for example, and at CVS, and at many companies we work with, the engagement on Thrive on Teams, because we can meet you. If you are a Teams company, everything that we have on the Thrive app or on the web is also available on Teams. And it's also available on Slack. The difference in engagement is extraordinary. Something like 14% on the Thrive app, 76% on Thrive for Teams. So we know unequivocally that meeting you where you are, especially because we know so much about your day. Like if we know that you are in wall-to-wall meetings, we're going to feed you these resets at the right moment. And the more we know about you through our AI recommendations, the more effective our interventions, our reminders are going to be across all these journeys.
Yes, for sure. So, we often talk about changing systems, Arianna, and I get really excited, but also frustrated because changing a whole system takes a lot longer than changing one mindset. So let's bring this back to the individual as we close here. What advice do you have for the employee who's ready to invest more in their own well-being, regardless of their system?
Well, that's such a great question, because we find that workplaces are at different stages during this transition, which is always what happens. You have the trailblazers and you have the laggards. And you have those who are regressing, like Elon Musk, who thinks that being productive and being what he calls hardcore means sleeping in the office and making bad decisions and tweeting things in the middle of the night that get you in court. Although I must say, just a side point here, that when he was in court in San Francisco, because of this inaccurate tweet he had done about having the funding to take Tesla private. He actually acknowledged the importance of sleep. He told the judge, my honor, your honor, sorry, I'm not at my best today because my back was hurting and I didn't get a good night's sleep. So great, absolutely wonderful that he acknowledged that. But my point is that companies are at different stages. So if, let's say, you are working at Twitter, it's up to you to take care of yourself. There is no operational cultural program to support you. So you need to really believe that if you get enough sleep, if you move during the day, if you avoid eating junk all day, you are going to be better at your job. And that means, again, starting small, picking, the ways that you want to improve your health and manage your stress, and then seeing the results. The data is so conclusive.
Yeah, I think the data is conclusive and we feel it, right? I know. I was thinking about you, Arianna, when I got in my car and I put it into reverse, and the camera that shows in the car, so safety camera, takes about 5 seconds to turn on. And it used to frustrate me so much. I'm like, just turn the camera on so I could go in reverse. Let's go. But I have taken that as my micro break of that 5 seconds to just take a deep breath in. I don't need to go anywhere yet. And I will put it in reverse and we'll go when I'm ready. So that's my version of it.
I love that. And you're right. It's kind of amazing that 5 seconds can make us we're so impatient. It can make us upset and reactive.
Yeah, agreed. And we don't want upset and reactive. I want people to be full of peace and progress. That's my wish for them and for you, Arianna. So thank you very much for joining Reworking Work, where we are poking at all the things that we know can be better or different.